7 o'clock, Your Worship.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. I'll bring this regular council meeting to order on Monday, May the 16th at 7 p.m. and to acknowledge that we are on the traditional territory of Stahelis. The next order of business, please.
Yes, we'll move on to number 2, introduction of late items. Do you have any late items?
Don't have any late items. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I have approval of the agenda then, please?
Approval of the agenda moved by Councillor Vidal, second by Councillor Hooper. Call the question. All in favor? Nobody opposed? Thank you. Next order of business.
We'll move on to number 4, adoption of council minutes. We have the regular council meeting minutes of May 2nd, 2022 here for adoption.
We have a move by Councillor Palmer, second by Councillor Vidal. Any errors, remissions? Being none, I call the question. All in favor? Nobody opposed? Thank you. Next order of business, please.
Yes, we'll move on to number 5, business arising from the minutes.
Is this from councillors arising from the minutes? Being none, we'll move on, please.
Thank you. We'll move on through items 6, 7, and 8, and 9, and move right on to number 10, reports of councillors, committees, committee of the whole, and commissions.
So Hooper, please.
Thank you. Good evening. On the 4th of May, I attended a webinar with the Tarmac Institute on the income security, climate change and community resilience. And on the 11th of May, I attended another webinar with the Tarmac Institute on central living experience. On the 9th of May, I attended a Zoom meeting with members of the Agassiz Harrison BCCRN. On the 4th of May, again, I attended a Zoom meeting and webinar of the Alzheimer's Society on how to identify early signs of dementia loss. On the 6th of May, I attended a Zoom meeting with members of the CNIB. 13th of May, I attended a Zoom meeting with members of the Autism BC on behavioural interventionist and the increasing understanding of applied behavioural analysis. And on the 14th of May, I attended the District of Kent's Fill the Pool campaign. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Palmer.
I have a library meeting on Wednesday, and then I think shortly thereafter we have a retreat. I've made some efforts again to talk to with our community relations or with Rhonda, basically Ms. Shell, to trying to get our public art committee once again formulated. And it's my determination to have a meeting before the end of June so that we're in a position to at least come up with some policies. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Piper.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On May 4th, I attended the Mountain Institution Citizens Advisory Committee meeting. We only met with the senior managers team online and no inmate committees due to the COVID outbreak at the institution. Our next meeting will be on June 1st. On May 11th, I attended the regular meeting of the Kent Harrison Joint Emergency Program Committee. And that meeting was in person, so that was nice. Some highlights from the meeting. The Spring Freshette is off to a late start this year. The provincial average snow basin index is 121% of the average based on automatic snow weather stations, primarily due to the delayed snowmelt. The emergency management team will provide regular updates as outlined in the flood response plan, which has recently been adopted both by the Village of Harrison Hot Springs and the District of Kent. Some great news, several applications for the emergency support services volunteer positions are in the screening and interviews are ongoing. Some more good news, the province is making significant changes to ensure access and receipt of increased benefits from BC's Disaster and Financial Assistance Program. An increase in provincial contributions to local infrastructure recovery will alleviate financial burdens when rebuilding critical infrastructure for municipal governments. Emergency Management BC is modifying the cost share formula, so the provincial contribution increases as the costs of projects go up. And we've seen that very clearly across the province of the disasters of last winter. So I applaud the province for acting swiftly to improve the gears of government to help residents, business owners, First Nations, and local governments for the next disaster any one of our communities may face in the future. It's the end of my report, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Good to hear about the financial side of it, especially with our regional electoral areas. Be very pleased about that. Councillor Vital.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On May 4th, 5th, and 6th, I attended the Lower Mainland Local Government Association Annual Conference in Whistler. I had the privilege of moderating a session on First Nations and local governments and the future of collaborative governance. Other sessions included resiliency during the 2021 atmospheric river and the heat dome, the decade of climate action, lessons learned in municipal politics. And during the resolution session, I'm pleased to report that over 20 resolutions were endorsed by the membership and on various topics and issues. And these will be forwarded to UBCM for consideration during the annual conference in September. It was actually wonderful to once again meet in person, and it provided lots of opportunity for networking and the exchange of ideas with other municipal councils and regional districts. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Next order of business, please.
Yes, Your Worship. We'll move on to the mayor's report.
Thank you. Carrying on with the Councillor Piper's good news. The primary care centre that's on Evans in Chilliwack will be open tomorrow, May the 17th. I think they had an official opening on the weekend. This serves communities from Agassiz, Harrison, Chilliwack, of course, Hope, and communities in the Fraser Canyon, Indigenous communities, Sunshine Valley, and Manning Park. So that's a great resource that's opened up at 7955 Evans in Chilliwack. In regards to the Regional and Corporate Services Committee meeting at the Fraser Valley Regional District, we had a, what was this about? The request for access to records and information under the Freedom of Information Protection Privacy Act. The second here. There's a small cost that's going to be added to this. This is at the regional district. They basically work out that their average reviewing the FOI request processed by FAID in 2022, the average fee charged for an FOI was $33.91. From 2011 to 2022, the request for the FOI has gone up 400%. In 2011, they had 11, and in 2022, 55. So it's gone up tremendously, this request, which is, it's there for the public to approach and fill out their forms to get whatever information they require. But personally, I said at the meeting, I don't believe that the amount of time, the first 3 hours, you may or may not know, is not charged, and a corporate officer can correct me if I'm wrong. Thank you. It is not charged. After that, it depends on how much research and the length of the FOI, how long it takes. And it takes a tremendous amount of resource and investigation on some of these requests. And I personally believe that the amount, I think it's going to be $10 is going to be added to the request is really nowhere near what should be charged for freedom of information. I mean, they're getting the first 3 hours free. But anyway, that's the regional district. That's what they're dealing with. On the 1820 mosquito, it's going to be another bad year, so get your sprays ready. Floodwater mosquito, a quick background. As snow melt begins in the province, the Fraser River water levels begin to raise. Floodwater mosquito larvae within the lower lying seepage areas can start to become active. Pre-season planning and preparation for the 2022 floodwater mosquito season has been conducted. A larvae monitoring by Morrow Bioscience Limited, Fraser Valley Regional District FERD contractors for floodwater mosquito control is underway. So that's moving ahead. It's going to be another one of those years. Regarding the Councillor Piper brought up the question of financing for these areas, and I know through the regional district in their 8 electoral areas, they had it's a tremendous cost, the flooding, and it was very slow in trying to recoup the finances that had to be paid out. But they did get a grant for $1.62 million, which will certainly help towards the future setup and the staff and everything else moving along, and also for the areas that are affected. Many homes were really badly affected in electoral regions. That was that. And as Councillor Vidal mentioned, I was also at the Lower Mainland Local Government Association. I'm very happy to mention that Councillor Patricia Ross from Abbotsford was voted in unanimously as president of the association, and our own Councillor Mickey Vidal was second vice president. First vice president is a gentleman from Langley, and I don't have his name in front of me at the moment. Laura DuPont was commended for her past time as the president and the great work that she's done. It was a very good turnout. I believe it's one of their record turnouts. I think they had 180 for dinner, and I couldn't get any dinner. There was no room for me, but that's okay. I had on my own. But it was very well turned out, well organized. The weather was much as what it is here at the moment. One thing that came out from the keynote speaker, Charles Montgomery, this was on the Wednesday, was in regards to more unity, and when you're building neighborhood homes, like I'll use the terrorist states as an example. From his perspective, he thinks that's a good way to go because it gives them more like the small subdivisions like Harrisburg and Harris Lake Estates. It gets people closer together, and they some become dependent on others to help them in certain ways. Him himself, after he for whatever reasons left home, got together and they built one of the, I call it co-op type of units in Vancouver. I think it was 36, something like that, Councillor, 36. And that's where it becomes a closer knit community. That's the word to use in, getting together for barbecues, helping each other, trips to the hospital, or if your dog needs taking care of. I know these things are happening in some of our subdivisions now, but that was his way. That maybe that's the way the the building element should go. As Councillor Vidal said, recommendations were passed. One was the Fraser Valley Regional Districts, again, and what Councillor Piper brought up, disaster financial assistance, that was passed, goes forward to UBCM. And the other one was their operations center reserve funds. That's what I was relating to, where at the moment they got the $1.62 million. Police, cost of police in smaller communities, that came up. Reimbursement for highway rescue services, that came up. These were all passed, by the way. Reinvesting in EV infrastructure is what we'll be looking at to the future. That was passed. And the increased funding for public libraries in BC provincial budget, that was passed as well to go to UBCM. So a lot of the most of the resolutions were passed. The other thing that there was a couple of good panels that were on there. One was to do with the past flooding with the Mayor of Abbotsford and the Mayor Braun and Jason Lum from Chilliwack and Chris Clute from Chilliwack were on that panel just to discuss in general how the floods affected their areas, how they all came together to help each other, especially the farmers with their animals and getting together and looking after each other. It was a very good session. Another session that that was of interest as well was the one to do in regards to what we're not all facing, but a lot of people are facing today, is the social media and how several municipal councillors or mayors are not going to be running again due to the backlash they've had on social media. It's getting really out of hand with the slander and racism, defamation of character that these social programs put out there. And really, you know, when you get people who are giving up their time away from their families, working for their communities, and they have to put up this type of social media slamming, it is a disgrace. I think these people, what do they call them, keyboard operators, whatever the word is, should be ashamed of themselves. You know, I mean, at least put something with the way things are going around in the world today, something that's positive and negative that will bring happiness to people instead of just slandering people. But there you go. There was a good panel on that. And of course, we had representations there from the highways minister, our minister, and also, oh geez, who took over today for the Kevin Falcon, the Liberals? He was there as well. Rob Fleming, our highways minister, as he got onto the stage, because when I went to see him, he did tell me that he supports Liverpool. So when he got on the stage, I said, "Go Liverpool." And he said to me, "Well, look who's saying that when you're supporting Chelsea, and who won the weekend? Liverpool." So I'm sure he'll be very pleased, and his family. But they gave their outlines of what their proposals are for the coming future for highways and our minister in regards to municipal affairs. And that was a very good session. Very nice to see the folks again. And it was, yeah, it was good. Thank you very much. Next order of business.
Thank you, Your Worship. We'll move on to number 12, reports from staff. The first report is regarding approval for permanent outdoor patio expansion. This is an application brought forward from LTK Investments Ltd, doing business as the Old Settler Pub. The village in May of 2020, council approved the Old Settler Pub's application for a COVID temporary extension to their liquor primary application. And that opportunity was made available by the Liquor and Cannabis Regulation Branch, and that was to support the hospitality industry's economic recovery through the pandemic. That approval was set in June 1st of 2020. And the branch that's a temporary authorization, which is set to expire in March of 2023. However, at this time, the LCRB has invited licensees who do have those temporary extension applications to obtain permanent status of those outdoor patio areas, so they can have that as a permanent licensing. As part of this process, the branch requires local governments to review the application and gather input from the community in the immediate vicinity of the establishment. Public notice was posted on April 13th on public notice bulletin boards, the village's website, and posted on the affected establishment. The deadline for those responses was May 2nd. At this time, council may receive public comments and consider whether or not there is an impact of noise to nearby residents and on the community. The village received one comment for this application. The Old Settler Pub is proposing a structural change, which is defined under the licensing branch as applications that propose to increase person capacity or to add a new patio. In this case, the Old Settler Pub is essentially adding a new patio to their license area. The patio area is entirely enclosed. It has been operating for the last 2 years. It must comply with all the regulations under the Act. The hours of business for this license area will remain the same as their current license, which is 10 a.m. to 12 a.m. Monday to Sunday. So the recommendation this evening is that the views and the comments of the public were gathered and one response was received, and that LTK Investments Ltd, doing business as the Old Settler Pub, application to the Liquor and Cannabis Regulation Branch for permanent status of their outdoor patio extension service area be approved. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have a recommendation. Do we have a mover and a seconder? Moved by Councillor Vital, seconded by Councillor Piper. Discussion. Councillor Hooper.
Yes, this was meant to be a temporary license, so now it's become a full-blown, they want to be a full-blown license. And this is for the increase to the patio area outside the main building itself, correct?
That's correct, Your Worship. That's the existing patio that they have been currently operating for the last 2 years, yes.
Yeah, I noticed we've had one member of the public response due to a noise complaint. And one noise complaint is one noise complaint too many. I know that the Old Settlers said that they've replaced some of the units there, but the noise is still continuing. There's a number of things they can do regarding suppression blankets for noise for these coolers and the rest of it. They're available on Amazon for less than $200 each. They could put trees around this area. They could fence it off with noise reducing panels, or they could use parabolic dishes to actually get rid of this noise. But that being aside, they now say it's going to be 100 people occupancy. This is like for the people living opposite, a party every night of the week. There is no let up for them. And the noise, and I've done some research. I mean, people are going to say there was only one noise complaint, but noise complaints or effective noise on stress on the body include poor sleep, difficult falling asleep and staying asleep, increased stress leading to increased anxiety, anxiety around confronting the neighbour about their noise output, ability to focus and concentrate impaired, feeling a sense of hopelessness and helplessness when the ability of noise control in your environment is taken away. Depression and exhaustion. Now, we're talking about increasing, a normal whisper is around about 40 decibels, which is okay, but increase that by 100 times. Also, we've had our own contractor, CTQ, on the subdivision bylaw, has recommended noise levels for a facility of the lift station must not exceed 65 decibels at the property line or 20 meters away, whichever's the closer. You're never going to achieve that if you're going to allow 100 people outside on the patio. This is ruining people's lives. And this was only supposed to be a temporary order to get them over the COVID. Well, according to everything at the moment, COVID's almost finished, done and dusted. So I don't see a point of extending this license, because all you're doing is affecting well-established residents that are going to have to put up with party noise 7 days a week till the 31st of October. And the original drawing that they actually gave to us did not mention how many people they wanted out on the patio, their application, and the drawing itself leaves a lot to be desired. So I can't approve this application. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Councillor Vital.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to our corporate officer, thank you for the report. I just have a couple questions. The concerns that the residents raised, it appears to me that a bylaw officer did attend in relation to the complaint. Do we have the outcome of what that bylaw report was? Thank you.
Corporate officer.
Yes, your worship, thank you. Yes, the complaint was received by the bylaw enforcement officer who investigated the complaint and attended the establishment and concluded her investigation.
All right, thank you. And just one other question. It's actually the LCRB that will grant the final approval for it. At this point, they're just seeking input from council and residents. Is that correct? So, yeah, is that correct?
Yes, your worship, that through you to Councillor Vidal. Yes, that is correct.
All right, thank you. And was the nature of the complaint from the resident regarding air conditioning units, or do we have the specifics on that at all?
Your worship, I can advise that it was a noise complaint.
All right, thank you. Fair enough. Nothing further, your worship.
Thank you, Councillor Palmer.
Thank you. I looked through this carefully. And I remember, of course, it came before us earlier during COVID when we approved it, because at that time it seemed to be necessary to help businesses survive. I had a little difficulty even then. I'm not one who always wants to see increased alcohol. I'm not excited to see people drinking in parks, which we don't have in Harrison, which is wonderful. I don't know that bigger and bigger and bigger alcohol facilities in terms of patios is good from a social or from a lot of perspectives or crime perspective, although I know it's good for business. But when the matter came before, in terms of COVID, I certainly voted in favor of giving a temporary extension. But at that time as well, there were also the issues that under COVID, there were some limitations about how how closely people could sit together. So even if you had a large patio, at that point, it was maybe only half usable because of some of the space limitations that were necessary. Now those space limitations aren't there. So if you have a large patio, you could fit 100 people on it. So I try to divorce my own little biases with regard to alcohol from the issue. And I try to look at this like I do every other thing. I try and look at it on a fairness basis. And when I look at it on a fairness basis, I have some challenges. I want to say, I like that pub. I've never been a huge customer of it, but I have gone in. I like the pub. It's a successful business. I want to see them do well. And they were doing quite well before they had the 100 temporary outside seats. Again, when I look at this, I understand why they want it. Who wouldn't want more space? Who wouldn't want more customers? Who wouldn't want more business? But I do think it has an impact on the people across the street. And I'm sympathetic to the letter that came in. I'm surprised there weren't more, but I think sometimes when we put ads out, it doesn't always result in people responding. I know that if I lived across the street, I would have written a letter because I have walked in the evenings, and because I do walk all the time and sometimes late at night. I know there's some noise, and I think normal summer where the place is full, there's going to be a lot of noise. People who drink alcohol, and that is of course what a pub is about, they talk more loudly as the night goes by. They will talk a certain volume at 8 o'clock, louder at 11, and so it is loud. And if it were behind my house, I wouldn't be happy with that. So I'm inclined on the balance of fairness, considering the pub was doing fine without this before COVID. I'm inclined to not be supportive of this extension. I think it creates an unfairness to the people across the street, because I do know it makes noise. And having a bunch of people, 100 people outside, we have neighbors who have parties beside our house in Harrison. Occasionally I get up and scream and yell at them 3 or 4 times. Sometimes I threaten the police. And it's very irritating. And that's little groups of 8 or 9 people. So I have sympathy for the neighbors, even if the neighbors haven't put forward a letter. So I'm going to be opposed again to this motion. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Councillor Piper? Yes, please.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Not to repeat other comments previously made, but I think, during the pandemic, we saw liquor establishments closed because of that activity and behavior that occurs when people add alcohol to their evening out. So I think if I lived across the water, which sound travels very nicely across the water, I would be not excited as well. I think the neighbors have been more than patient as we limped through COVID and did everything possible to support our local businesses so they could keep the doors open and when allowed. And the outdoor space there was a part of that. So I am hyperly aware that, yes, there is only one letter, but some people, aren't as confident coming forward and not wanting to make any ripples. So the noise does carry, and I think saying status quo is what I'm going to be comfortable with. So thank you, Your Worship.
Councillor Hoover?
Yeah, I mean, even if this application is turned down, it doesn't really solve the problem of the noise from the coolers and the rest of it. Now, if the old settler was good neighbours and that they would do something about it. So I'd like to take this opportunity to ask them, please do something about it. Thank you.
Thank you. I just have some comments to make. As we know, the patio itself, not the building, was extended on the outside, so that won't stop whether you're going to have 100 or 150 people there. That can still carry on. That won't stop that because the patio is there. It was there like we know what happens in a lot of countries in the world where families can come and sit down outside and with their children and have a bite to eat and a beverage. So well, I can't see that changing. I personally stood on the trail. I stood on the back of the pub. I stood at the front of the pub. I asked the neighbors which were closer to the pub. Neighbors were closer to the pub, so the only noise they hear is the brushing of the machine in the morning when they're blowing the leaves, or I spoke to one of the owners who tells me that they go off periodically every 15 minutes, but from 11 p.m. till 8 a.m. in the morning, they are set so they don't come on. Those generators or whatever they are for the running. Obviously, they have to have these things because certain beverages have to be kept at a certain temperature, especially the beer. Otherwise, it's no good. So that now the pub has been there for I'm just going to say a number of years. I can't say how many. It's just a number of years. That was there. It was first a restaurant, and it was turned into a pub. And I think that and I personally, sorry, I have to be honest, this is the first time that I've ever heard or seen a complaint from 200 block of Miami River Drive, or anybody from Cedar on that side of the pub, or even from the people who live above the gas station. I've never heard of any complaint, or even I can't recall any complaints from the owners of the Glencoe Motel, which is right next to this, of their residents when they book a room, having to say, well, I'm leaving because I cannot stay because of the noise. So I, as I say, I stood there for three times. I went on the pathway. Twice I went to the back of the pub, twice to the front, and it wasn't going continuously, the sound of these machines. There's a concrete slab at the back, so I don't think, like Councillor Hooper said, you could put trees there because it would be on the other person's property. There's one big machine at the back there. Maybe that's the one that's causing the problem. I mean, I feel for the people. I'm surprised we haven't had any more letters, because I know when there was a problem with that pathway several back when Councillor Piper's first run around on the council, that they came with a petition to tell us not to touch it at that time. So I don't know why there isn't more people on that 200 block that would have sent through correspondence to complain about this. But it is a location where people are going to be sitting outside in the summer anyway, whatever happens. I mean, after 11 o'clock, our bylaw states, call the police if there's people having, like Councillor Palmer says, having a party or whatever. I think it's 11 o'clock. That's what our bylaw states, I believe. And complain to the police and let them deal with it. But it's a business. I mean, you know, it's very, I don't know, I can't see, I mean, whether it looks like this application is going to be turned down, but I can't see that it's going to create any less noise in the summer months when all the motorbikes are turning up. As you all know, you've seen the parking lot when it's full of motorbikes. And then people with voices travel. We live in an area where sound travels. It's very difficult to stop that. And, you know, the pub was there before, or the restaurant and pub was there probably before that section of Miami was built as well, you know. So it's a very, you know, I mean, COVID helped a lot of businesses to try and recover. I'm sure, and I know from 2 or 3 businesses, they haven't recovered because of the losses they had over that period of time, which is, to some it's millions, not a few thousand. And The Settler Pub also is one of the largest employers in the community as well. So whether that will be affected by this, again, I really don't know. But they're my comments. I did do a bit of walking around, and it didn't. I couldn't hear this continuous sound that the email states that it's going continuously. So I could not hear that. So any further questions on this before Councillor Palmer, then Councillor Hooper again, Councillor Hooper, Councillor Palmer.
I just wanted to make the point that we're looking at an extra 100 people, right? So I mean, that's what it's going to accommodate is 100 people. 100 people make more noise. And we're not looking at what noise it made last weekend or the weekend before during the rain. Sorry? I'm sorry. I thought, we're not looking at that. We're looking at, in my mind, we're looking at what noise will come from that in the months of July and August when the patio is full, the weather is warm, and we all know that Harrison carries more noise than any other community I've ever seen because of the mountains. And so I do think it's a concern. I don't think it's this, I think that 100 makes a difference. And yes, I respect it as a business, and I know they have a lot of employees, and I think they're a very valuable member of our community. Does that justify us in allowing it to have more noise? Maybe they were there before the houses behind, but they didn't have the 100 seats before those houses behind were built. So this is an additional noise that we would be accommodating. That is my point. Is that it just seems to me that it does make noise. People in those circumstances, and I don't judge it about what noise it made 3 weeks ago when people were indoors. I judge it in the in the peak of the summer. What is it going to be when that place is filled? And I think it's going to be very, hugely noisy. Anyway, I've expressed myself. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Councillor Hooper.
Yeah, admittedly, the coolers don't run all the time, but under the World Health Organization notes, the intermittent noise, the silence, and then it coming on and disturbing the peace is even more health damaging than the actual constant noise. Because with constant noise, you can actually try and block it out yourself. But with this intermittent noise, no, you can't. And as I say, there's a number of options to stop this. The cheapest is to put noise suppression blankets around it. As I said, they're on Amazon. They can actually put fence around there with acoustic plates on to actually dampen the noise. They can use parabolic shield to go around it, but they've done nothing. Now they're aware of the complaint, but I've seen it here. But the concern that I have is that the bylaw officer has said that nothing can be done because this is an industry. Now, to me, we have allowed a number of large workshops within residential areas. Are we going to say that they're industries now? No, and the 100 people, I mean, we have a drawing here from the Old Settler, which shows 24 people in the patio area, the enclosed patio area. We got 6 tables with 4 chairs around it, and that. These 100 people extra are going to be outside on the grass area, and that's when the noise is going to echo. And it's not just the noise. And it's if they got young children with them, it's the screeching of the children, and it is the smoking outside, which they're allowed to do, that goes across the water as well. So,
In council, no smoking is allowed, only in a designated area outside by the liquor store. Smoking isn't allowed anywhere when you're sitting at a table.
as far as we're concerned, there's going to be no tables there. People are going to be standing about. They're going to be walking out with their drinks and the rest of it. And again, this is affecting people's health. and that is my main concern. So I can't actually see this. And as I say, it doesn't look like the old settler's been a good neighbour and actually made any real attempt to reduce the noise from these coolers. So the answer to that is no, I can't support this application.
Thank you. Do we have, I'll ask the staff, and I'm only asking this question because I'm concerned with the comments that you just made, councillor. Have we in the past had any complaints from Fraser Health that people's health have been affected by living near a pub?
No, your worship, the staff has no comment on that issue.
Because I'm concerned about that, because if it's such a health problem, then we would have had we would have had complaints from the beginning when the pub first opened up, which has not happened in all my years on council, from regards from health I'm referring to now. So again, I appreciate your comments. They're all worthwhile comments. I don't think the noise is going to be decreased, Councillor Palmer. I think with the open patio outside, and now that COVID over, there'll be more seats. You can have closer, there'll be more, instead of seats being so far apart as they were before, there'll be more seats, or what they're allowed. They're allowed a capacity, I suppose, in that patio area at the moment. But through COVID, obviously, everything was much further apart. That will probably come back. And I'm not sure how the patio that they built, how that is affected under the licensing, because I don't know whether that was just done because of the COVID situation to allow that extra patio extension. It may have been, but if that is allowed by the Liquor Control Board, then there was seating and tents on that new patio that they built outside. I'm referring to on the grassed area that they put. They finished it off very nicely. So there were tables and tents there. So I'm not sure that the noise level is going to stop from there if people are sitting outside in any way whatsoever. I think if it's summertime when people are sitting outside having a nice evening, I mean, we can get the same. We could talk about the same about our campgrounds on Hot Springs Road. I'm not mentioning anyone. It could be either the 3 or 4 of them that's down there. That in the summer months when people are sitting outside or in the swimming pool or the hot tubs, that their voices will carry. And I know that one of our well-known entertainers does entertain in one of those campgrounds every year. I think it's in July. So you know, it's sound will travel everywhere. You know, I mean, I'm not gonna put the pin that it's going to affect people's health, because I've never heard of a health situation coming from any noise in Harrison Hot Springs, especially from the pub and all the years that it's been running there. So, and also we used to have a nightclub situation on the front street. Never had complaints, obviously, of the noise, but never that it had ever affected people's health in any way in the condominiums that were close by. So that being said, there's nothing else. It looks like it'll look too good here. I'm going to call the question on the recommendation. Any further discussion? No, I'm going to call the question. So there's no further discussion. Call the question on the recommendation. All in favor? Opposed? Everybody's opposed. Thank you. That's that one. Next order of business, please.
Yes, the next report we have is from the Community Services Manager regarding the flag policy.
Thank you, Your Worship. The current flags policy was adopted on March 1st, 2021, and is being amended to include special days that are consistent with the federal government rules for half-masting the national flag of Canada. I would just like to point out that under section 4D on page 12 of the agenda package. There's a section in brackets after September 30th, National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, that states flags lowered to half-mast for one entire week prior to this day. This was a special request from Stalis. That's not on the federal government policy. That would be particular to us. So I just wanted to point that out. The recommendation is that the amendments to flag policy number 1.36 be approved. Thank you.
Moved by Councillor Piper, second by Councillor Palmer. Discussion. Councillor Hooper.
Yes, I've got no real problem with this, except for it excludes our armed forces, members that have been killed in peacekeeping duties, or, as we know, the ongoing situation in Europe. It could just develop. So why have we not included our armed forces within this? Thank you.
That, I think, is already written in there under the mayor's. Under the mayor can do that, and I did that in several occasions for the armed forces over the years when I had the flags raised for that, lowered for that. So it's there under the mayor who can have consideration. Is that correct, Michelle? Would you like to explain that for me?
Yeah, that is exactly correct. And this was covered when the policy was adopted in March 1st, 2021.
Further discussion? Councillor Palmer.
Wanted to make the point that, of course, Remembrance Day is listed with regard to armed forces, and police and peace officers National Memorial Day is listed. So I don't know that they're excluded. Thank you.
Further discussion? None being, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Nobody opposed? Everybody in favor? Thank you. Other business, please.
Yes, we'll move on to the next report. That's also from the Community Services Manager regarding the 2022 grants to groups.
Joe?
Thank you, Your Worship. This year, we received 5 applications for the 2022 Grants to Groups Fund. All of the applicants met the criteria for funding and provided financial statements for the prior year if they had been funded. Attached is a spreadsheet that highlights some of the past funding contributions, as well as this year's request, and a description of what they're requesting to use the funds for. The total budget is $7,500 annually, and this year's applicants come up to $7,350. So the recommendation is that the following community groups be provided with funding under the Grants to Groups program: Agassiz Harrison Community Services, $2,000, Miami River Streamkeepers Society, $1,000, Agassiz Harrison Aquanaut Swim Club, $1,350, Storytime in the Park, $1,000, Kent Harrison Arts Council, $2,000. Thank you.
Excuse me, Your Worship.
Oh,
Councillor Hooper had a question.
As I'm a fully paid up member of the Miami Streamkeepers, do I need to excuse myself from this meeting?
CAO?
Your Worship, staff does not provide legal advice to members of council. However, if a councillor has a conflict that is a pecuniary interest in a decision being made or perception of a pecuniary interest, it is up to them when they are reviewing the agenda to do their research before the meeting and make a decision as to whether or not they feel they need to exclude themselves on the basis of conflict of interest.
Thank you. I'll excuse myself on this one. Thank you.
Councillor? So noted. Okay, what am I after here? Moving the seconder? Yes, moved by Councillor Piper, second by Councillor Palmer. Discussion. Councillor Vital.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Michelle, I just make note that Miami River Streamkeepers are indicating that $1,000 would be used for operational expenses. Am I right to assume that that would be for like office supplies and paper and stamps and
Michelle?
That's exactly what it would be for. There was nothing indicating wages, but it just supplies and bill payments, electricity, things like that.
thank you, your worship. Nothing further.
Thank you. Any further discussion on this? Will I call the question? All in favor of the recommendation? Thank you. Move, pass, no objections. Next order of business, please.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. We'll move on to the next report. This is the report of the planning consultant regarding the official community plan review update.
Hi, Ken, how you doing?
Fine, thank you, your worship. And how's council tonight?
We're all doing good, thanks.
Good
It's
deal.
all it's all yours.
Thank you very much, your worship. This evening, we're talking about the official community plan review update. And it's just updating council on the work completed to date on the OCP review project and to present the second survey results. Earlier, council approved the community consultation program that consists of 6 elements. And out of those 6 elements, 4 have been completed and 2 are pending. The ones that have been completed include the setting up of the website, the pop-up event, the online surveys, and the letters being sent out. 2 of the pending issues are the displays and the World Cafe, which will be held on May 25th and the 26th. And given the success of the first pop-up event that we had, where we had 35 participants, we're thinking about hosting another one sometime in June or July, after we get some of the details of the official community plan further moved along. The first survey was completed, as we all know, from February 1 to February 8th, and there was 140 responses. And out of that, 302 people were aware of the survey, defined as visiting at least one page of the website. And there was 231 people that were informed, which has been defined as downloading a document, visiting multiple pages, or responding to the survey. And there was actually 140 people that were engaged, and that means that they actually responded to the first survey. On the second survey results, the survey was active from May 4th to April 29th, or I'm sorry, April 4th to April 29th, and we had 84 responses. This was, and the statistics that we received indicated that there was 181 people that were aware of the survey, 103 that were informed, and 84 that were engaged. And the second survey format, we had 15 write-in questions and we had 9 quantifiable response or yes or no answers. And from that, the 15 write-in questions included, and they're attached to the report for you, listing to your top 3 favorite things you liked about Harrison, the top 3 least favorite things you liked about Harrison or had about Harrison, ideas for community planning issues over the next 20 years for Harrison, what were the top 3 urgent issues to be addressed. We looked at briefly at the parks. We saw some of the top 3 non-residential development issue responses. We asked what are some of your daily need issues. We looked at how the residents define what we mean by development information sources. We looked at the wildfire development permit tool. We looked at the top 3 transportation issues. We looked at various types of housing stock that was requested. We asked the question, if you could not support aging in place, please explain why not. We also asked that on seasonal housing, if you can't support seasonal housing, why can you not support seasonal housing? We looked at or asked the questions on steps to reduce the greenhouse gas effects. And then we had the final question, which was, what are your additional comments? And then from the quantifiable questions, we had 9 questions that were there, and that was dealing with park safety. We were dealing with pedestrian road safety, looking at major roads and local roads, and we left that definition up to the residents to define what they mean by in their own mind what they mean by a major road and a local road, and we'll flush all of that information out further at the World Cafe. We asked about the satisfaction with the locations of the parks, the park accessibility standards. Again, we looked at the daily needs issue. We looked for additional information on the wildfire development permit area support, and we talked about aging in place and seasonal housing, and then again, reduction on the greenhouse gases. So with that, Your Worship, just as I mentioned, there was two reports, one dealing with the responses that could be quantified, and the second is the write-in comments. And I'd like to draw your attention to page 13 or page 39 of your agenda package of the quantified responses, because in that report, the question is cut off. And the question was in its complete form on the survey. And the question was, the provincially created community wildfire protection planning process was started as a result of the devastating fires in Kelowna in 2003. In this plan, a toolbox of options is recommended to help reduce the threat of wildfires coming into and away from a community. One of these local government's tools is the use of a development permit as outlined in the Local Government Act. This allows the village to require additional information before the development may proceed. And then we asked the question, do you think that the village should set up a wildfire interface development permit tool? And the results of this question indicates there is overwhelming support for the creation of a new wildfire interface development permit tool. With all of the questions and the survey that we have in front of us, the review team will be looking at all the comments provided for further discussion at the World Cafe sessions. As I said, they're set up for the 25th and 26th of May. And overall, our community participation statistics to date, we have 483 people that are aware of the surveys, 334 people that have been informed. We have 224 people that have been engaged. We had 35 people show up at the pop-up event. And for the World Cafe, we're setting up for 48 participants for each session for a total of 96 participants over the 2 days. And looking at the comments received to date suggests so far that there is still considerable support for the current vision and the goals of the current official community plan. With that, Your Worship, we're recommending that the official community plan review update dated May 11, 2022 and attachments be received for information.
Thank you, Mr. Cossey. So we have moved by Councillor Palmer, second by Councillor Piper. Discussion. Councillor Vidal.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, Mr. Cossey. Thank you for the update, Mr. Cossey. And although I'm fully aware of what a World Cafe session is, I'm not so sure. Maybe people in attendance here tonight, either in person or in Zoom, or who are going to be viewing this meeting, the recording of it once it's available. And I'm just wondering if you would mind elaborating a little bit more on what the World Cafe is and what it will entail. Thank you.
Certainly, Your Worship. Yes, Your Worship. What the World Cafe will be doing is we'll be asking a series of 6 questions dealing with land use transportation, the municipal services, the overall perception that people have with the current official community plan. And we'll just be asking them to sit at a table. As I said, there'll be 6 tables set up. They can bounce from table to table to table all the way through, because they'll only be allowed 10, 15 minutes at each table. Or if they choose, they can sit at one table all evening or for that 2-hour period. And overall, it's just basically, we're going to be looking and discussing about the strengths and weaknesses of the transportation issues, land use issues, environmental issues, some suggestions on greenhouse gas issues, and just what we should be looking at for the next official community plan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cossey. I think that's really helpful. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other Councillor Hooper?
Yes, good evening, Mr. Cossey. Everybody around the table is probably aware that I'm not a fan of these online surveys, but Of the people that took part in these surveys, do we know actually how many were actually full-time residents of Harrison?
Mr. Cossie?
Yes, your worship. When we did the first one, we were basing it on the first one. We had 140 respondents, 130 were from the village, indicated they were from the village, and 10 were from outside of the village, but they come here on a seasonal basis.
Yeah, like most surveys, you normally carry out a select process of actually checking up on, say, 10% of these. Was that done at all?
No, your worship, we did not do that follow-up. We're not choose fact-finding at this particular point in time. What we're trying to do at this point in time is just collect all of this information and then go back to the public. And this will include through the open house or the public hearing and all of those and the things prior to the public hearing, and just say, this is what we've heard, and did we get this right? And if not, tell us where we need to amend or change whatever the policy is.
Yes, I mean, we mentioned this bit about the wildfires and that. Did we not receive a wildfire action plan back in 2019?
Yes, I believe you did, your worship.
And we don't know what action's been taken on that so far.
Yeah, that's what the purpose of the development permit tool is to take action on that at this particular point in time.
Yeah, on these two up-and-coming dates, will it just be Harrison residents that will be accommodated on these tables?
Yes.
And will the councillors be invited to actually attend?
So that one, Mr. Cossie?
I can't speak to that.
It wouldn't be appropriate for councillors to attend because like you just quite rightly said, Councillor Hooper, this will all come back to council for decision making and a public hearing and then more decision making. The whole idea is to get the information from the public and those people that live here. Thank you.
It's just that I know of a number, well, 4 people that feel uncomfortable in meetings and would like somebody there to represent them. So.
I'm sorry, sir, if they feel uncomfortable, ask them to call me, would you? Thank you.
Will you be attending?
No, ask them to call me.
Will you be attending?
No, I won't be attending, but ask them to call me and I will talk to them.
No more questions. Thank you.
Discussion on this? Councillor Piper.
Thank you, Worship. Just a really quick comment and appreciation to the team. You're doing great work, and the reach out to our public is phenomenal. Especially when this started, it was during difficult times. So just my appreciation to you and your team for some great work so far, and really looking forward to seeing this process through to the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other comments? I just have to thank you, Mr. Cossie, for where we are at this stage. It's a very well thought out plan. I should say that looking at the numbers on the community participation here, if I remember correctly, the growth strategy plan that the Fraser Valley Regional District, which covers 300,000 people, I think the numbers that you've shown here, I think are actually very, very, very good, actually, compared to the people that participated in the same way through a survey with the regional district for their long-term growth regional plan. Just want to bring up some highlights here that I noticed. That what level of personal safety do you feel in parks during the night? Well, according to the question options here, the yellow 25 95% is safe and pretty close is very safe, which is nice to know. Well, we know it's a very safe place, Harrison. And as a pedestrian, what level of personal safety do you feel on major roads during the night? And again, the yellow was safe at 27%, and the blue at somewhat. And the other one, do you feel that the parks, trails, and open spaces are located within a reasonable distance from your home? And overwhelmingly, green was the yes on that one. Do you feel that parks in Harrison Hot Springs meet accessibility standards? And again, green, 68% was overwhelming with that one as well. And the other one, we've already spoken about the wildfire. And the last one here, do you believe that seasonal employee housing should be considered? And overwhelmingly green, 54% was on that one. And how would you rate the community efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions? And this looks like blue at 25% and green, and also, sorry, and mauves at 25%. So overall, I think that the community is being very well covered. I know there's a number of folks that are looking forward to the 25th and 26th, the cafe situation. That's something that I think you will get a lot of participation, a lot of input from that as well. So I think that's a very important one. Glad that that's in there, because I think that to have community members involved, sitting around a table and having discussions as well is very important. But we're a long way from finish here. As I say, there's all this information to be put together, be brought to council, public hearings to go. So it's, but overall, Mr. Cossey, thank you for your participation and your team, and look forward to the reports from next week's cafe sit down. Any further questions from council? Being none, I'll call the question on the recommendation. All in favor? Everybody's in favor, nobody opposed. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Cossey.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Yep. Next order of business.
Yes, we'll move on to the next report. This is from the operations manager regarding the water reservoir maintenance.
Mr. Cook.
Thank you, Your Worship. The Harrison Hot Springs Water Reservoir, constructed in 2008, stores the village's potable water supply for domestic water distribution and fire flow purposes. The cathodic protection system designed to protect the reservoir from corrosion has reached the end of its useful life, so the system requires replacement. In addition, the reservoir requires general maintenance and repairs. The scope of required work includes the installation of 18 new anode assemblies, reservoir cleaning, and general maintenance and repairs. The reservoir will need to remain empty while the maintenance work is completed. However, the village's potable water and fire protection service will remain in service for the duration. Great Aereo Services is the exclusive Canadian dealer, installer, and service provider of the village's reservoir infrastructure. Accordingly, it is recommended that Great Aereo Services be awarded the contract to supply and install the replacement anodes and additional maintenance and repair works. The reservoir anode replacement and reservoir maintenance project is expected to cost up to $88,000 and will be funded by the water utility reserves. Recommendation in front of council this evening that Great Aereo Services be retained to undertake the purchase, installation, and related works for the reservoir anode replacement and reservoir maintenance project for up to $88,000 to be funded from the water utility reserves.
Thank you, sir. And we have a recommendation by Councillor Piper, seconded by Councillor Vital. Discussion. Councillor Palmer.
A simple question. In terms of it reaching the end of its life, what is the anticipated life? And did it last longer than what's expected, or shorter, or? And when we put the new system in, what's the life expectancy of it?
I don't have that information.
Okay, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Yes, just a couple of quick questions. It says here that the village portable water system with fire protection remain in service during the duration. So that will be maintaining the maximum daily demand plus the fire flow. So we're quite comfortable with for 60 litres per second up to 225 litres per second for the hotel and the rest of it. And will we still be allowing people to water their gardens during this and other bits and pieces, or is that a restriction we're going to put on just to save water?
Mr. Cook?
I believe that was two questions. The first question I'll answer is the pumps that are installed will maintain the supply. We're going to push the works until fall where the demand is low. And your last question regarding restrictions, they will be in place as per every year.
So there'd be no restrictions on people like flushing their toilets or anything like that. There was another question. Just eluded me at the moment, but I'll let somebody else have a turn. Thank you.
Any other comments from council? If there's no other comments, I'll call the question. Unless you can remember, Mr. Hooper, Councillor Hooper.
Just that we're to actually get this water through. It's no longer going into the reservoir. It's going straight through to the filters and the rest of it. Is there any increased damage to the filters by actually passing this through? Will it decrease the life of these filters, or because if I remember rightly, we've agreed to spend quite some money on replacement of these filters. Will they be done before or after this work?
Cook?
The filters will be replaced after this work.
Thank you.
If there's no other questions, I will call discussion. I will call the question on the recommendation. All in favor? Opposed? Nobody? Motion passes. Thank you. Next order of business.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. As there are no bylaws on the agenda this evening, we'll move on to new business. Do you have any new business?
No, there's no new business.
Thank you. We'll move on to number 15, questions from the public pertaining to agenda items only. And Tyler, would you ask those members attending by Zoom?
Anybody on Zoom this evening would like to ask a question? Now's your opportunity. Thank you.
Anyone on Zoom, if you have a question, please raise your hand and we'll call on you. Looks like there are no questions, Your Worship.
Good evening, John Allen, 398 Hot Springs Road. I'm a neighbor of the Old Settler Pub and I can hear the noise, but I never got any notice or letter. And I don't think any of the other people on my side, the south side of the Miami did, because the area, the radius of the area whereby you notify neighbors has been reduced to 30 meters. And I don't think that even gets across the river. There used to be a radius of 1,000 feet. Anybody within 1,000 feet got notification of such a thing. But now those of us even across Lillooet Avenue, even though we're directly across neighbors, we don't get notification because of the shortened radius. So I wasn't aware of this application. I didn't get notification, and I do hear the noise from the Old Settler Pub quite frequently in the summertime. So it is an issue for my guests because I tell them all to go to bed at 10 o'clock at night, and yet there's noise still coming across the river until midnight. But my real question is, why was there no planning consideration made? If you're adding 100 people to the permitted capacity of the business, our parking requirement under the zoning bylaw is that you must provide, I think it is 1 parking space for every 4 seats, which would mean that they would have needed 25 parking spaces to get this patio approved. But in all of the reports I've heard tonight, the planning consideration and the zoning bylaw, never mind the OCP, were not even considered. And I would like to ask why. The parking study that we just finished doing and paying, I don't know, $70,000 or $80,000 for, completely ignored the requirement for off-street parking. And again, you're ignoring it in this report tonight. So I'd like to know why that would be.
Your first question regarding, there was a statutory notice, I believe, in the papers, is that correct?
That's incorrect, Your Worship. It
That
was
was-
not a
that's-
statutory
that's-
notice. It was
that-
just public notice.
That is what is required statutory to put it in the newspaper and probably was on our website as well. It's
well,
not-
sorry,
It's not.
I don't get the newspaper. They don't deliver here
Well,
anymore and I
then-
can't
then
find
it-
one.
It was also in all the village bulletin boards.
I
And
don't
also
read
on the
those.
website. I'm sure you read our website. So
No, I
that's all
don't.
excuse me, sir, you asked me to answer your question. I'm trying to answer it. So in reference to your second question, what the council passed tonight was to do with their liquor license, was not to do with the development.
Yes, but if you're approving 100 additional customers on the premises, that should trigger a parking requirement. And why did it not, is my question.
No, all we were required tonight was the Liquor Control Board was to give a blessing or no blessing to the requirement for the extension of their patio.
But Mr.
There's
Mayor,
no building plan that's come to the village, to my knowledge, regarding that. When if ever it did, then what you're just asking would have to be looked at. So that's my two answers to your question. Do you have any questions?
well, I don't find the answer satisfactory. I want to make you that very clear.
Well, I'm
because
sorry about that,
the
sir, but
provision,
I'm
the
asking
provision
you.
of parking is not a liquor board responsibility. It's a village council responsibility.
We're not, again, I will say for the last time, we were only here this evening, which council turned down to discuss the extension for the liquor license. That was requested by the liquor board, which was put into the newspapers, the websites and our bulletin boards as a statutory notice, and a requirement to send it to every home within 100 meters was not required.
Well,
Yes.
very good.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions from the public this
Well,
evening?
no, I have another question, Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
Your first response should be, where are these people going to park? And it wasn't, but we'll carry on. Why do you persist in calling this process you have about the OCP a review? It is not a review. A review would entail an examination of the existing official community plan and an examination of all of the objectives and promises made to the public within that plan, and an assessment by some outside authority, not by people who are involved locally, an assessment of whether or not any of the objectives have been achieved, and if there have been violations of the official community plan, for instance, in the allowing of tall buildings along the lakefront, how many of those have happened and why did they happen? What we do not have in front of us in any stretch from Mr. Cossey or anybody else is a review of the OCP. We have a process that seems to pretend that there is no OCP in Harrison and never has been, and a whole new one is required. An OCP is supposed to be a progressive instrument that develops and evolves and provides a level of certainty
Thank you,
to
Mr.
residents and
Thank you, Mr.
investors
Allen.
in a long-term way.
Thank you, sir. I get your question.
Why?
I get your question. You're asking why we're calling it a review, and I will answer that. That's all I'm going to answer. It's now and if you wish, I will pull it out for the next council meeting and read it out to you, which I read out to you about 3 years ago, and all the process that these councils have gone through in looking at a number of areas in the existing OCP which have been completed, from infrastructure to roads to widening. There's also a paragraph there which relates to heights as well, which can be allowed. All those things were read out at a regular council meeting where you were present. Several issues which I pointed out. Mr. Cossey is covering all the areas regarding the review or the new process for the OCP. This is just a process that we're going through. It's not completed. There's more to be done. There's more input from the public, which we ask for and we want. And that's the way it's going to go till it's completed. We have to get to a public hearing, and there's a little way to go yet before we get to the finalization of the OCP. I credit Mr. Cossie and the staff for the way they're conducting this. It's being conducted in many communities this way, like you heard me mention, the regional district with its large, vast geographical area conducted it in the same way. Any other, that's all for this evening. Any other questions, sir, you'd like to ask? You're okay, are you? Thank you.
Well, would
So-
you please consider changing the name of the process and stop calling it a review?
No, thank you,
you.
Mr. Allen, for your comments. Much appreciated. And call the question to adjourn. Councillor Piper was quick first. Councillor Palmer, all in favor? Thank you very much. Thank you, folks, for coming this evening. Thanks, staff.